The Battle of Cassinga. Cassinga Raid or Kassinga Massacre was a controversial South African airborne attack on a Southwest Africa People's Organization military base at the former town of Cassinga, Angola on 4 May 1978. Conducted as one of the three major actions of Operation Reindeer during the South African Border War, it was the South African Army's first major air assault. Claims continue that Cassinga was a refugee camp, rather than a military camp, and that consequently the raid was a massacre of civilians rather than a highly successful military operation. While there are extensive records covering the SADF's planning and actions around the operation, no SWAPO records other than photographic evidence of the mass grave exist. Background. Starting in 1976, SWAPO plan combatants regularly traveled south by road from Huambo through Cassinga, an abandoned Angolan mining town that was located about halfway to the battlefront at the Namibian border. The town had about 20 buildings that previously served the local iron ore mine as warehouses, accommodation and offices. A group of planned soldiers led by Dimo Hamambo occupied Cassinga some weeks after they began using it as a stopover point, according to both Charles Ho Chi Minh Namalo and Wetufa Cabral Mapopawa, who accompanied Hamambo when the village was first occupied. The first Namibian inhabitants of Cassinga consisted entirely of trained plan combatants. Not long after the establishment of the plan camp at Cassinga, it began to function also as a transit camp for Namibian exiles. The Angolan government allocated the abandoned village to SWAPO in 1976 to cope with the influx of thousands of refugees from Southwest Africa, estimated in May 1978 to total 3,000 to 4,000 people. 2 days before the South African raid, UNICEF reported of a well-run and well-organized camp but ill-equipped to cope with the rapid refugee increase in early 1978. The Cubans, who set up a base at nearby Tecumseh when they intervened in the war in 1975, provided logistical support to the SWAPO administration at Cassinga. According to SADF intelligence, logistic planning and the provision of supplies, weapons and ammunition to insurgents operating in central and eastern Angola were undertaken from Cassinga, which they learned from Plan POWs was codenamed Moscow. Medical treatment of the seriously wounded as well as the repair of equipment and the assembly of newly trained insurgents on their way to bases in the East and West Cunene provinces all took place in Cassinga. South African planning. By the beginning of 1978, SWAPO had improved its organization and gained strength in Huambo and the Eastern Caprivi. UNITA was under pressure from the MPLA, and it became increasingly difficult for the SADF to operate in southern Angola. South Africa also feared the disruption of elections it planned to hold in Southwest Africa excluding SWAPO. The attack on Cassinga grew out of the plan for Operation Brulhof, wherein the SADF envisaged attacking 6 SWAPO targets around the town of Chetiquera. During the intelligence-gathering portion of the planning for Operation Brulhof, the SADF concluded that the small town of Cassinga was the principal medical, training and control center for the guerrillas in the region, and one of SWAPO's 2 regional HQs. The SAF still held air superiority over Angola at the time, allowing 12 Squadron to conduct aerial photo reconnaissance with Canberra B-12s in spring of 1978. These photos showed newly built military infrastructure including concreted, drive-in, bunkers for AFVs covering approach roads, zigzag trenches surrounding the base, foxholes for machine guns, mortar crews, and the highly characteristic, star-shaped, concreted base structure for a SAM-3 missile battery and its radar command vehicle. Also identifiable from the imagery was a civilian single-decker bus. Plan combatants at Cassinga were aware of the overflights, and in a letter dated 10 April 1978, The camp's commander Hamambo expressed concerns to his superiors about an imminent invasion intention of our enemy of our camp in southern Angola. In response to the reconnaissance flights, defenses were improved through the creation of a secondary camp north of the main camp, the addition of more trenches and the digging of holes for the protection of food provisions. The SADF shelved the plan for Operation Brulov and planning for a new operation, Operation Reindeer, began. Reindeer was composed of three main actions: the airborne assault on Cassinga, a mechanized assault on the Chetaquera complex at 17 degrees 07, 43 S 14 degrees 53 minutes 38 seconds east, 17.1287 degrees south, 14.8938 degrees east, minus 17.1287, 14.8938. That also involved SAF defense suppression strikes, and an assault on the Dombondila complex at 17 degrees 19 minutes 59 seconds south, 14 degrees 50.00 E, 17.333 degrees south, 14.8334 degrees east, minus 17.333, 14.8334 by a light infantry force. The planners for the operation were faced with a significant problem. While the Chetaquera and Dombondila complexes were only around 35 kilometers from the border with Southwest Africa, Namibia, therefore making conventional assault possible, Cassinga was 260 kilometers from the border and deep inside Angola. This meant that any conventional assault force would have to fight its way in and out, and would almost certainly have given advance warning to the planned soldiers in Cassinga, allowing them and leaders like Jerobiam, Dimo, Amambo and Greenwell Matongo to escape. Cassinga furthermore was located on a small hill, flanked by a river on its west side, and open fields in other directions. Factors that combined to give any defenders the advantage. However, South African Defence Force intelligence reports had ascertained that SWAPO, and probably its advisors, was lulled into a false sense of security due to Cassinga's distance from the border. Intelligence briefings before the event indicated no awareness of any nearby supportive infantry or armored units to support the base against a ground assault. And although SWAPO had been constructing a system of integrated defensive trenches and firing points for wheeled-tracked AFVs and AAA units, they were not then prepared for a joint arms airborne attack. The SADF had not previously demonstrated any such capability, giving military analysts no reason to suspect that such was available to the SADF planners. The planners therefore believed that they had the possibility of conducting a surprise attack on the base using only an airborne assault, without ground support. Earlier in that year, SAF 12 Squadron had commenced training for a low-level strike role, utilizing anti-personnel weapons such as cluster bombs. The South Africans knew about Operation Eland and Operation Dingo, preemptive raids conducted in the previous 2 years by the Rhodesian Selous scouts against guerrilla forces based in Mozambique, and modeled their raid on many of the same principles. Though a risky plan, it was decided that the element of surprise would outweigh the disadvantage of having no supporting armor. The decision was therefore taken to mount a large airborne assault on Cassinga, supported by South African Air Force fighter bombers and a fleet of 17 medium transport helicopters. Using an exercise already underway called Exercise Quicksilver as a smokescreen, the Army initiated a call-up of the citizen force parachute units. The paratroopers conducted refresher parachute training at the base of 1 parachute battalion in Bloemfontein and then field training in the area surrounding the derelict Reinholdskop farm on the De Bruyne training area. A top-secret document prepared by General Magnus Malin for the then Minister of Defense, P.W. Botha, refers to Cassinga as a large SWAPO base located 260 kilometers north of the border. It is the operational military headquarters of SWAPO, from where all operations against SWA are planned and their execution coordinated. From this base all supplies and armaments are provided to the bases further forward. Here training also takes place. In short, it is probably the most important SWAPO base in Angola. The nearest Cuban base is 15 kilometers south of Alpha. The South African cabinet was hesitant to authorize the operation, fearing an international backlash. But on the 2nd of May 1978, the Prime Minister, John Vorster, finally approved the go-ahead for the operation to commence. The date of the 4th of May was specifically chosen as it was after the United Nations Security Council debate on Southwest Africa ended, so as to avoid making lives difficult for those countries favorable to South Africa. Composition of forces. South Africa, because of the secrecy involved in the operation, and the commitment of most of the permanent force troops and national servicemen of 1BN in other operations, it was decided to use 2 and 3 parachute battalions, both citizen force, in the operation. However, the need for secrecy meant not enough citizen force soldiers could be called up to fill both parachute battalions. As a result, all 3 were temporarily merged into a single composite parachute battalion, which was commanded by Colonel Jan Breitenbach. The final composition of ground forces for the attack on Cassinga was therefore the following. The entire operation was run by Major General Ian Gleason, who commanded the SWA Tactical HQ. Overall control of the airborne forces was given to Brigadier M.J. Du Plessis, who commanded the Parachute Brigade HQ. The units under his command were the Composite Parachute Battalion under Colonel Breitenbach, that was composed of A, B, C and D companies, an independent rifle platoon, a mortar platoon and an anti-tank platoon. The Helicopter Administration Area Protection Force under Major James Hills, consisting of 2 Hawk groups from 1BN, an Airborne Reserve under Captain Wesley de Beer, consisting of a company from 2BN Airborne in a C-160 to be used in the event of reinforcements being required, and the Mobile Air Operations Team under Commandant James Creel, which consisted of 5 staff personnel to set up and run the HA. All the paratroopers were equipped with the R1 7.62 mm assault rifle. The South African Air Force contribution consisted of 4 C-130 Hercules and 5 C-160 Transall transport aircraft. The helicopter component of the operation consisted of 13 Pumas and 6 Super Frelins. The air attack component provided by the SAF consisted of 4 Canberra B-12 bombers, each carrying 300 Alpha anti-personnel bombs, 5 Buccaneers carrying 8 1,000-pound bombs each, as well as a 6th carrying 72 68mm rockets, and lastly 4 Mirage 3 fighter aircraft, armed only with Sidewinder air-to-air missiles and the 30mm cannons fitted with high-explosive fragmentation shells. One crew from the Canberra squadron was tasked with acquiring further photo reconnaissance imagery, some to be used in the preparation of photo strip maps for the tactical low-flying legs that the various aircraft types would undertake, there being inadequate conventional mapping of much of the region, and additional and up-to-date detailed imagery of the Cassinga environs for the Parabat, drop zone and Buccaneer target planning purposes. Particular attention was paid to identifying units of AAA deployed in, near the target complex. It was during this phase that a serious error was made, with potentially disastrous consequences. Air photo interpreters put the wrong scale on some of the maps that were used in the planning, despite the altimeter readings being clearly visible in the original reconnaissance photographs. Consequently, the Air Force planners overestimated the size of the DZ, believing it was long and wide enough to drop the paratroopers, when in fact it wasn't. This scale error also mispositioned the warning and drop points on the run into drop. Compounding this horror, the pilot of the lead aircraft was momentarily distracted by the effects of the bombing, and issued the jump signal a few seconds late. The net effect was that many paratroopers overshot their intended DZs, many landing beyond the river, and some in it. Playing a supporting role was a single Cessna C-185, which flew in the target area and acted as an observation post as well as a radio relay aircraft. In addition, there was a single DC-4 Strike Master fitted out as an ELINT aircraft flying over the SWA-Namibia border with Angola. The purpose of this latter aircraft was to both intercept all Angolan, Cuban and SWAPO radio transmissions, before jamming their communications networks at the appropriate time. The successful jamming of the SWAPO, Angolan and Cuban communications network is one of the reasons for the late reaction by either of the latter two in responding to the attack. Plan. The armed wing of SWAPO was a guerrilla army and therefore did not have a traditional command and control structure. As such, it is impossible to determine a composition of units inside Cassinga. According to TRC findings, a self-defense unit posted at Cassinga consisted of approximately 300 male and female plancarders. The military section of Cassinga was easily partitioned from the non-military sections. The overall commander of plan in town was Dimo Amambo, who responsible for the coordination of all plan actions in southern Angola, including incursions into southwest Africa, Namibia. A headquarters such as Cassinga was second in importance only to Lubango, which was the overall SWAPO military headquarters in Angola. Aside from the system of trenches and bunkers, defensive equipment included two ZPU-4 14.5mm anti-aircraft guns, one Zu-23-2 23mm gun, and around one or two ZSU 12.7mm guns. These were capable of being used in a ground attack role. Cuba. The nearest Cuban military presence was 15 kilometers south of Cassinga, at the village of Tecumuta, located at 15 degrees 14'00 S, 16 degrees 02 24 E, 15.2332 degrees south, 16.04 degrees east, minus 15.2332, 16.04. It consisted of a reinforced mechanized battalion of at least 4 T-34 tanks, 17 BTR-152 armored personnel carriers, 7 trucks and 4 anti-aircraft guns, accompanied by around 400 troops. This unit was known to SADF intelligence, who had intercepted their radio traffic, and were also aware of their anti-UNITA operations. Their strength was estimated at 144 in October 1977, and was a major contributing factor in the choice of air rather than a ground assault. In briefing the strike air crew, the SAF Chief of Staff Intelligence was specific that there were no known military formation within 80 miles, except for a detachment of African police, with 1 truck. In debriefs, when questioned by commanders and aircrew of the two strike components, Canberras and Buccaneers, he insisted that the Cuban formation, being just some 15 kilometers to the south at Tecumuta, was a complete surprise and must have been deployed there in recent days. Certainly, no photo reconnaissance over that village road junction was ordered, but could easily have been included in the later Canberra PR overflights of Cassinga.